I extend a warm welcome to all of you to this very special program, Gandhi Katha. As you know, we are commemorating the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the Indian nation. Mahatma Gandhi was an apostle of peace, and his birth anniversary is celebrated as the International Day of Non-Violence following a decision taken by the UN General Assembly. Throughout the world, a series of events and programs have been organized over a period of 2 years to commemorate this very special occasion. In Oman too, we have organized a number of events. We organized a mega event on 2nd October 2018 in which high dignitaries from Government of Oman also attended. This event was organized in collaboration with the Raj Yoga Center. Since then, we have organized seminars, talk shows, Satyavarta, exhibitions, quiz competitions. We have distributed books on Gandhiji to educational institutions in Oman, and we have produced Gandhiji's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jante Tene Kahiye, in the voice of an Omani singer. In all these events, we have seen enthusiastic participation by members of Indian community, by our Omani friends, as well as expatriates of other countries. Gandhiji's teachings and values espoused by him remain relevant today. His emphasis on the virtues of peace, non-violence, and harmony with nature are relevant for all of us even today. And the Sultanate of Oman is a living example of the continued relevance of Gandhiji's teachings and values. Today's event, Gandhi Katha, as I mentioned earlier, is a very special event. Katha is the Indian oral tradition of storytelling, and we are really fortunate to have with us today Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna. Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna is a world-renowned Gandhian. She has this unique program in which she presents to us in very simple, easy to grasp manner the teachings of and the values espoused by Gandhiji by narrating the story of Gandhiji's life. She has delivered this talk in more than 70 countries. In many places, she has done it in person, but in the COVID situation, she has been organizing this program virtually. And we are really happy that she has agreed to do this program for Oman. I'm sure all of you will have a very interesting, inspiring, and a motivating experience. So I thank Dr. Shobhana for joining us today, and I wish you all a very productive, very fruitful program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador H.E. Shri Munnu Mahavarji, for your kind message. Namaskar, and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. I express my deep gratitude to the Embassy of India in Muscat, Sultanate of Oman, for hosting the Gandhi Katha amidst these challenging times to learn from Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means, his spirituality, his environmental credo, his practices of health and wellness of body, mind, and spirit, for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On October 2nd, the world celebrates the UN International Day of Nonviolence, and in India, we celebrate the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi as Gandhi Jayanti. The entire world is remembering Mahatma Gandhi, the apostle of peace and nonviolence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. His Majesty Sultan Qaboos bin Said's vision for the development of Oman and his people reflects the ideals of Mahatma Gandhi. He had added, and I quote, Mahatma Gandhi was the pivot behind India's struggle for independence as he led millions of Indians, all bound together by two principles, truth and nonviolence. I pay my respects to the leading lights of Oman and convey my warm wishes to the people of Oman's, and the Indian community who have joined me online today. The two countries across the Arabian Sea are linked by geography, history, and culture and enjoy warm and cordial relations, which are attributed to historical maritime trade linkages, intimacy of the royal family with India, and the seminal role played by the Indian expatriate community in building of Oman, which is acknowledged by Omani government. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narration. I have given talks on Gandhi Katha in 94 countries during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Gandhiji in the past 2 years. In all the countries, people have great reverence and respect for Mahatma Gandhi. Many have been inspired by him to take up the cudgels against injustice through nonviolence. Others have followed his environmental credo, and still others have been deeply touched by his simple spiritual life. The humanism of the world's thought leaders are so deeply reflected in Mahatma Gandhi's teachings. The new generation is eager to understand more about this greatest man of the last century who made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many leaders across the globe. I'm happy to know that Colonel Abdul Wahab from Oman had given a talk on Mahatma Gandhi in the Indian mission last year, and he is greatly influenced by Gandhiji. Today, in the field of international conflict resolution, people are interested in the effectiveness of peaceful means for ending disputes, as demonstrated by Mahatma Gandhi, compared with the use of force or nonviolence. In peace building contexts, scholars and practitioners are seeking to integrate authentic, indigenous, and local cultural methods of conflict analysis and interventions. People are finding inspiration in Gandhiji's ideals and his lifelong efforts of peace building and conflict resolution through interfaith dialogues and harmony. So, throughout his life, Mahatma Gandhi engaged in finding solutions through interfaith and cultural dialogue for brotherhood, communal unity, and harmony. Gandhiji had deep respect for world religion and he developed lifelong friendship with people from different religions. He took time to study, reflect, and engage with different faiths and faith communities. During his lifetime, Gandhiji read the Holy Quran more than once and also many books on Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It made a deep impression on him that Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, often fasted and prayed, and that he had revelations not in moments of ease and luxurious living, but when he fasted and prayed, kept awake for nights together, and would be on his feet at all hours of the night as he received revelations. Mahatma Gandhi cultivated respect for Islam. To Gandhiji, the central teaching of the Holy Quran remained that of peace. He regarded Islam as a religion of peace. He found Muslims to be brave, generous, and trusting. He sought to gain Muslim friendship through love. His ultimate remedy was to deal with the wrong, but not to hurt the wrongdoer. Thus, to him, the ultimate answer lay in the concept of live and let live, on mutual forbearance and toleration in life. He said that this is the lesson he had learned from the Holy Quran. Mahatma Gandhi used to start and end his day with prayers. In the ashram, every activity and program used to begin and end with prayers, in which prayers from all the religions were sung. Sarva Dharma Prarthana. Gandhiji's internal core comprised of the essence of all the religions, one that he had acquired from long study and reflection. The devotional poetry of the saint poets that he had heard, sung, and absorbed since childhood made up a significant part of the life of his soul. He said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, and tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence and have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions and cultural background from around the world. And he actively encouraged friendship across religions. So, one of the legacies that Mahatma Gandhi has given to the world is of nonviolent conflict resolution through interfaith dialogues for establishing brotherhood, communal unity, and harmony. Even after 7 decades after Gandhiji has passed on, in every part of the world, his relevance is felt as strongly as ever before, and his visions and actions are of an enduring significance for all times and places. His approach to life was holistic and cannot be divided into watertight compartments of social, religious, political, personal, and public life. Gandhiji stands out as the champion not only of political democracy but also of economic and spiritual democracy in today's world. Gandhiji believed that moral degeneration is the root cause of all evils, including conflicts. This explains his lifelong crusade of attainment of moral values such as truthfulness, nonviolence, purity of means, love, self control, sacrifice, forgiveness, friendliness, compassion, mercy, and so on. For Gandhiji, satyagraha or nonviolent resistance in civil disobedience, the principle behind it was by non cooperation with evil through the moral values of love force, truth force, soul force, self sacrifice, and suffering. For him, the consideration for the sufferings of the fellow human beings was of paramount importance. His belief and actions that social change for establishing justice and dignity of humans is both less harmful and more sustainable when achieved by non-violent means. His legacy of satyagraha is widely recognized the world over and seen in many moments for civil rights even till today. And that is his first gift to humanity. Mahatma Gandhi's environmental practices were based on conservation of natural resources, which were often misused and overused for the sake of development. Gandhiji had warned about the unsustainability on the global scale a century ago. Equality for women within the society was a principle Gandhiji passionately believed in. His vision of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, becomes very relevant in the crisis of internally displaced people and migrants. It may well have been kept in mind that the very basic unit of human organization, a village or a county, was his vision for Gram Swaraj, which is self reliant, independent, self governed village built on the premises of sustainable growth that is the need of the hour. Romeo Rolla, the French writer and pacifist who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote the biography of Mahatma Gandhi in 1924, and that made Gandhiji known to the Western world. In 1931, on his way back from the Second Roundtable Conference from England, Gandhiji stopped by in Switzerland and spent 5 days in Villeneuve with Romeo Rolla. And Romerola wrote, and I quote, "This little man is so fragile in appearance, is tireless, and fatigue is a word that does not exist in his vocabulary. He could calmly answer for hours without a muscle of face twitching. His mind proceeds through successive experiments into action. And he follows a straight line, but he never stops." I will play the Gandhi Katha dhun or hymn in Hindi that elaborates on Gandhiji's definition of truth as having harmony between thought, words, and deed. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through nonviolence throughout his life till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, nonviolence, and purity of means has inspired me to give Gandhi Katha so that people can put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji, get inspired to learn from his extraordinary ethical and moral leadership, his simple spiritual life, revolutionary thoughts, actions, his lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice, and how he continues to inspire people in all the parts of the globe at all times and in all ages. Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. The faith gave him the constant awareness that he was to be nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and forms. That was the path on which the greatest of the world leaders, world teachers had already walked. Two, he had to constantly gaze inwards and find inspiration through self introspection, self examination, and self purification. That he did by repeated questioning. And that question was Ko Aham, who am I? What am I? And what is the real purpose of my life? This question has been asked in our ancient Indian civilization since the past 5,000 years. The answer came to Gandhiji that the real purpose of life was to serve others. The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Mahatma Gandhi. He said, Truth is God, Satya hi Parmeshwar hai. Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, then each person is capable of being truthful, of being good, and doing good to others. The second realization was that, in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress in an auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. His endeavor throughout his life was devoted to the search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. But because of this understanding of oneness, Gandhiji had no enemies. He did not want to settle scores with anyone, and he did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love, compassion, and respect to others. And that was one of his traits. He respected individuals as individuals, and that was another trait that we see in Gandhiji. Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy was primarily truth centered. Truth was the first and foremost principle in Gandhian philosophy. Gandhiji's life was a continuous series of experiments with truth. He applied his philosophy to his own life through selfless service and to practical and social political service through his nonviolent civil disobedience campaigns, which he termed as Satyagraha. And as I said, Satyagraha is his first gift to humanity. For Gandhiji, truth is the relative truth of truthfulness in thought, word, and deed, and the absolute truth, the ultimate reality. The ultimate truth is God and morality, the moral laws and code, its basis. Nonviolence, far from meaning mere peacefulness or the absence of overt violence, is understood by Gandhiji to denote active love. Gandhiji's nonviolence stems from two main points. First, if according to the divine reality all life is one, then all violence committed towards another is violence towards oneself, towards the collective, whole self, and thus self destructive and counter to the universal law of life, which is love. Secondly, Gandhiji believed that non-violence is the most powerful force in existence. Had violence been superior to non-violence, humankind would long ago have succeeded in destroying itself. The human race certainly could not have progressed as far as it has, even if universal justice remains far off the horizon. From both viewpoints, nonviolence or love is regarded as the highest law of humankind. Another aspect that gave him strength was the clarity that he had acquired from years of experiments and reflection on the philosophical content of Satyagraha. He was clear that Satyagraha was based on the principle of Advaita, of non duality. If the same essence of soul encompasses all human beings, it would allow a Satyagrahi to become one with the oppressor. Any failure to touch and reach out to the opponent would be a failure of Satyagrahi and not a shortcoming of the philosophy of Satyagraha. Moreover, with the experience that he had had over the years, he had begun to see love as a very powerful and positive force. The challenge before him was to use this force with effect. The bigger the challenge, the more enthused Gandhiji was by it. He realized that untruth, injustice, oppression, and tyranny last only as long as their victims accept them. The moment one learns to say no to untruth and injustice, their edifice collapses immediately. This was true for the political, the economic, and the social order. Mahatma Gandhi is the greatest apostle of peace the world has seen in the recent past. His notion of peace is focused on tolerance, forgiveness, compassion, love, oneness, respect, truth force, love force, and soul force through self suffering and sacrifice. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the first half of the 20th century, had called Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme practical leader for change. And listen to his voice.
I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our time. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non-participation in anything you believe is evil.
Gandhiji was the conscience keeper of humanity. That his ideas will be an inspiration to us both as individuals and as a society is beyond any doubt. He was an epoch maker, one who could sow the seeds for the next generation from the fruits of the previous one. Mahatma Gandhi is the most powerful visionary and a practical idealist from the first half of the last century, whose life is a role model for us all. But the effort has to begin from the point where you're standing. That is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical, and he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean that he was very busy, that he was. What we mean is the action of putting ideas and beliefs into practice more than anything else was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching. Gandhiji has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines such as economics, spirituality, politics, conflict resolution, international peace, civil rights, education, society, and many, many more fields. At that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. Mahatma Gandhi advised to shun these 7 social sins in his speech on October 22nd, 1925. Politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without ethics, knowledge without character, pleasure without conscience, science without morality, worship without sacrifice. In my opinion, Mahatma Gandhi's life left the most powerful and strong imprint on the humanity of the world. He had said, "My life is my message." John James Holmes was a pacifist, an anti war activist, and founder of American Civil Liberties Union. He had met Gandhiji in London in 1931 and had traveled to India again in 1947, and he met Gandhiji again. He found Mahatma Gandhi's presence, those bright eyes shining through his spectacles, his voice so clear and yet so gentle, his whole presence so simple and yet so strong. He said, and I quote, "I believe that he is unquestionably the greatest man living in the world today. When I think of Gandhi, I think of Jesus Christ." Now I'll play the Gandhi Katha Dhun or hymn in Hindi about Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, purity of means that combine together in Satyagraha.
लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन.
Time magazine had listed out 3 most important protests over 190 years. The first one was the Boston Tea Party. The second one was the Dandi March or Salt Satyagraha. And the third one was the March of Washington. We can see a common thread. The first and second were against the same company, the East India Company. And there is a common thread of non-violence in all 3. In 1930, with a pinch of salt, Mahatma Gandhi shook the world. He started out on 12th March from his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat for Dandi seashore with 79 fellow marchers, walked for 24 days, walking 10 miles a day, stopped at 48 villages, spoke in the morning and evening to mobilize people, covered 241 miles till he reached Dandi seashore on 5th April in the early hours of the morning on 6th April. When he bent down and picked up a fistful of muddy lump of earth with salt, 100,000 people joined him. And towards the progress of the salt satyagraha, 300,000 people broke the salt law all over India. 1,362 newspapers covered the news. Williams Lawrence Shearer, the American journalist, was present during the Salt March to cover the event, and his graphic reporting brought the incidents to the notice of the world. Thus, Mahatma Gandhi remains the most powerful global brand ambassador of nonviolence, a youth icon who fought against injustice, apostle of peace and nonviolence, a man whose values can make the world a better place today. Gandhiji had spent the initial 18 years in India. Those were his formative years, where the seeds of spirituality were sown. He spent 3 years in London as studying to become a barrister. And that is where he came across the thoughts and philosophies of great writers and thinkers of the West. And his vision expanded as he read Bhagavad Gita also at that time. He was around 19 years of age. And two verses of the Bhagavad Gita impressed him very much. And those were from the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And I will recite two shlokas for you now. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa Sangasteshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kamat Krodho Vijayate Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha Sammohat Smriti Viprama Smriti Phranshad Buddhinasho Buddhinashat Pranashyati. And since that time, Gandhiji lived according to the central messages of the Bhagavad Gita, selflessly, without attachment and possession. His commentary or translation on the Bhagavad Gita, which he wrote in 1929 after 38 years of conduct according to the Bhagavad Gita, is called Anasakti Yoga, and it is a very wonderful book which all of you should read. In 1904 in South Africa, and in South Africa Gandhiji had spent nearly 20 years. So in 1904, after reading John Ruskin's book Unto This Last, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi transformed his life and started leading a community life of self-control, voluntary poverty, bread labor, and servodaya, welfare of all. And this transformation happened overnight after he read the book. He established 4 ashrams in his lifetime, 2 in South Africa called Phoenix Settlement in 1904 and Tolstoy Farm in 1910, and 2 ashrams in India, Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat in 1917 and the Sevagram Ashram in Wardha in Maharashtra in 1936. Here, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi, along with the ashram community, lived in poverty like the common villagers of India. Ashrams were his ideals of non-violent face-to-face society for Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and carrying out constructive programs, which is his second gift to humanity. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary seekers, and satyagrahis for offering the highest sacrifice in the freedom struggle on one hand, and to get involved in constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor, to establish their self-respect and dignity. His ashrams were his ideals of carrying out the work for welfare of all, of Swavalamban, Swachhata, Seva, and for realizing his vision of Gram Swaraj or Village Republic. I am happy to inform you that I was born in his last ashram in Sevagram. My father was inspired by Gandhiji since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle in India and lived in the Sevagram ashram. Even after Gandhiji passed on in 1948, for more than 5 decades, my parents and all of us have continued to walk on the path that Gandhiji has shown to humanity. So what I'm telling you today is based on what my parents told me, my own experience and understanding of Gandhiji. The life and thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi are intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society. And his constructive work was integral to his politics. The unique practices of Mahatma Gandhi, his control of palate, his fast, his spinning, his silence, and his prayers gave him the internal strength. which were part of as much a part of his politics as much of his spiritual life. These practices and experiments were sustained and nurtured by the inmates of the ashram that he had founded. The ashram community, through his own practice, affirmed, modified, and validated Gandhiji's ideals and practices, and continues to do so even till today. This shows the relevance of his practices in the ashram in the morning and evening prayer. The first verse from the Ishopanishad, the shortest Upanishad from India, used to be played. And that said, Ishavasyamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyan jagat tena tyaktena bhunjita ma gridha kasya svidhanam. Everything in this universe belongs to God. Nothing really belongs to us. Enjoy the objects of the world in an attitude of perfect non-attachment and take whatever you need to the extent that is required for you and leave the rest for others in the society. Never ever crave the position of others. Nothing really belongs to you. And I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun. ना यह तेरा ना यह मेरा ईश्वर का यह राज है, which explains this concept of renounce and rejoice. Gandhiji carried out his experiments in health and wellness through nature cure, diet control, hydrotherapy, sunbath, mud packs, and observing silence for one whole day in the ashrams. So the ashram community kept on practicing it and practices it till today. Our friend and the British Quaker, Sir Horace Alexander, lived in Gandhiji's ashrams in India for a very long time. He noticed that in the daytime, the bell used to ring 56 times in the ashram. He said, and I quote, Gandhiji had wonderful courtesy and punctuality. I was to learn quickly that he was the slave of watch. He had more to do in every 24 hours than almost any other man. So he had learned how to pack the most into every minute. Yet he never gave the impression of being hurried and impatient. Gandhiji has given 3 gifts to humanity. First one is Satyagraha, second one is constructive programs, and the third one, about which people really do not know, is Ekadasha Vrata, or the 11 observances, which were a set of rules for the ashram community made by Gandhiji for spiritual progress and voluntary self-control. The rule behind the observances was to do unto others what you want others to do to you. Ivan Illich, the Croatian-Austrian philosopher, had come to Sevagram ashram in 1980 and he stayed for a week, and every day he sat in the cottage where Gandhiji used to live, and that is called the Bapu Kuti, for a very long time. And he said, and I quote, This heart of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness which we can derive from practicing the principles of simplicity, service, and truthfulness. Though Gandhiji's role and contribution to the political arena are well known, what is less known is his contribution towards health. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. His interest in health, hygiene, nutrition, and diseases was as great as his interest in politics. He insisted that adopting preventive measures for diseases was better than treatment. He also said that it was important to focus on cleanliness, a controlled diet, and an exercise regimen, and that it was best to avoid overconsumption of medicines, especially those that were not required. He was also a firm believer and practitioner of nature cure and conducted experiments related to diet and fasting throughout his life. He always believed that it was important to understand what caused diseases and then remove that very cause rather than falling ill again and again and attempting to treat it with excessive medication. Gandhiji was essentially a man of science. He approached a problem in a scientific manner. Mahatma Gandhi's message to the world on the vital question of health and well being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of the service to God and His creation, which was his mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. His message was simple and easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self control, reduce the wants, follow the tradition, cultural practices, and the values, follow the environmental credo, and treat oneself through nature cure for living in harmony with nature. Gandhiji was very interested in health and wellness and remained ever vigilant about his own health as well as of others. He said that our lifestyle should be such that it should not let any disease come anywhere near us, and every person is responsible for looking after his or her body, mind, and spirit impeccably. He also advised that in order for keeping physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, we should have perfect understanding of our bodies, which is made up of the five elements that are found in nature. And that is what has been told by our ancient seers and sages in India. And these five elements are air, water, fire, earth, and space. For the wellness of our bodies, the balance and harmony between all these five elements is necessary. For Gandhiji, the outside universe was but a reflection of the inside universe. He repeated time and again that the universe is compressed in the atom. There is not one law for the atom and another for the universe. It was based on his actual spiritual experience that gave him the conviction that moral principles have no meaning unless they can be made to serve as the guide of conduct in the daily affairs of man. The Sanskrit proverb Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande says, "You are the universe within the universe. As with the self, so is the universe. What is going on within you is same as what is going on in the universe." Enveloping ourselves in the rhythms and forms of nature can be transformative and healing. Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition of India, recommends spending time in nature every day. Doing so allows us to experience the wonderment of this existence with all our senses. Nature allows us to shift our attention beyond the domain of our ego and to recognize that we are inextricably connected to the universe. From the mind body perspective, Gandhiji's standpoint was that health is an optimal integration of body, mind, spirit, soul, and environment. Environment is our extended body. There is a nice Vedic expression from the ancient traditions of India which says, as is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, so is the microcosm. As is the universal body, so is the cosmic body. As is the universal mind, so is the cosmic mind. Yoga and meditation integrates all component of health, and Gandhiji was a strong believer and practitioner of nature cure, Ayurveda, and he practiced Ashtanga Yoga as well. His experiments with nature cure were always on himself. He had advised his friends and disciples to follow these remedies and treated and cured 30,000 patients through nature cure. Dr. Sherwood Eddy was a leading American Protestant missionary, a prolific writer, and an educator who visited Gandhiji in his Sabarmati ashram in Gujarat in 1929 and wrote that Gandhiji's bodily presence is like that of Apostle Paul or Socrates. He impressed us as the most childlike, the most transparent, the most lovable of man. His whole character is centered in his unique passion in truth and reality. I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun, Aankhein Pavitra Rakh Satya Hi Tu Bol, which
आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल.
very few people know that as a couple, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi, his wife, contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health emergencies, treating patients as frontline workers, and serving humanity. During the Second Anglo-Boer War from 1899 to 1902 and in the Zulu uprising of 1906, he set up the Natal Indian Ambulance Corps along with the Indian Indentured Labour and Free Indians and served as stretcher bearers. In the bubonic plague outbreak in Johannesburg in 1904, Kasturba Gandhi and Gandhiji rushed to take care of the Indian indentured labour, quarantined the patients in an empty godown after cleaning and sanitizing it, and treated some of them through nature cure. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi returned to India in 1915 at the age of 45. In the Spanish flu influenza pandemic that struck the world in 1918, Gandhiji opened up his Sabarmati ashram as a quarantine center and treated and served patients through nature cure, provided simple vegetarian diet to boost immunity, and maintained physical distancing. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi took care of the families of the patients, looked after their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, and gave them correct information for maintaining safety, being positive through prayers, meditation, and recitation of Ramanama, and taking care of each other during the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. Gandhiji had said on 10th November 1918, our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past, but today we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them, even in our present broken state of health. And that way is the way of self-restraint or sanyam, or of imposing a limit on our acts, wants and desires. In 1942, August, Gandhiji wrote the book Key to Health, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors or vaidyas or the traditional health practitioners from day to day. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crises globally. First is the COVID 19 pandemic. The second is the serious and long drawn financial crisis. And the third is the ecological crisis, which is impacting everyone. We have to look for answers somewhere within ourselves while learning from the life of Gandhiji, which was so transparent and open and full of action. The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is very simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, the nation is affected, and then other communities in other nations in this globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together as one human family, as brothers and sisters. Whether we choose to see it or not, we are living in the same home, our planet Earth, our Mother Earth. Our ancient sages and seers have always looked upon us as Vishwamanava, or global citizens, and said that the world is one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The current COVID 19 pandemic is a wake up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of the existence of humans. We will have to learn to live with COVID 19 now and in the future as well. Instead of reinventing a new lifestyle, we just have to get inspired from the life of Gandhiji to make the necessary changes in thoughts, actions, and conduct for coping up physically, mentally, and spiritually. And this is the future that the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic is pointing out to us if we observe carefully. But if we still return to the normal standard of finding happiness by chasing after money, power, position, lifelong consumerism, then COVID 19 has given us the wake up call. The kind of lifestyle of empty consumerism and mass distractions has only increased the difference between the rich and poor, created the huge carbon footprint, increased the misery of the invisible poor masses. When a crisis makes you feel stressed, meditation, prayer, and recitation relieves the stress response. Fear and anxiety are forms of stress that become exaggerated when events become uncertain, when you feel a loss of control over the situation, and when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up. The thinking mind reacts to all of these conditions. It always has, even in normal times. But a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very capable of lowering the immune system of our bodies and causing inflammatory diseases. Decades ago, stress was classified as epidemic of modern life. The Gandhian way of life is the best guide to practicing the coping mechanism that induces relaxation, calmness, inner peace, absence of anxiety, and remaining positive. So Gandhiji comes across as the greatest healer and wellness guru who comes free of cost. I once again take this opportunity to thank the Indian Mission for hosting the Gandhi Katha. My special thanks are to all of you who have joined me online. I will end with the peace benediction in Sanskrit for the universal welfare. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let all be happy, let all be healthy, let all experience auspiciousness, let no one be overwhelmed by grief. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. With Gandhiji's blessings, who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light, I will end with the Gandhi Katha hymn, Shubha Mangal Ho.
Shubha Mangal